Hey there, YoProKnow audience. I have a question for you all today. How many of you have been told your entire life to always keep your resume updated? Now, how many of you have actually kept your resume updated? Is your resume collecting cobwebs somewhere in the back of a notebook that you kept in college? Before I got involved in any of this work with YoProKnow, mine certainly was. If any of this sounds like you as well, it might be time for you to see a pro. Luckily for you, we actually know one. Stacy Mailer should be a familiar face for those of you who watched her story with us on our podcast and video series a couple of months back. She owns her own company, Next Level Career Coach, and has an array of services for you to check out. When you use any of her services, you'll actually get a 10% discount when you say you're a part of the YoProKnow audience, which I'm very excited to offer. So what are you waiting for? Your resume is definitely waiting on you. Hey there, everyone. It is Camber here with the YoProKnow. I'm sitting here today with Ben Bostick. He is 26, living in Washington, D.C. currently. He's worked primarily on campaigns since he graduated college a few years ago. And most recently, he'll tell us about the campaign that he has been working on. We are interviewing, right now it's November, a couple weeks after Election Day. And so I'm very eager to dive into those details. But first, I always like to share how we're connected to our interviewees. And so you might see a familiar apartment behind Ben right now. His roommate interviewed with us it was last week. And so you have already heard Jake's story. But the two, I guess, were set up to be roommates a couple years ago, and they have lived together ever since. So, Ben, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
All right, so let's just dive right into it. Go ahead and give us a brief background on you. So where you're from originally, how you ended up in DC, how you ended up in campaigns, and then we'll talk more about those details.
Sure, yeah. So I grew up right outside DC, went to high school in DC, and so had kind of always been around this area and kind of tangentially involved and interested in politics. So I went to school up in Maine at Colby College, and while I was there, I was a government major and environmental studies minor, was always interested in politics and government, but wasn't exactly sure that was what I wanted to do immediately out of school. When in my senior year, I was kind of looking to teach in Spain or do something along those lines, just exploring a lot of different options. And then Trump was elected, and I just kind of got pulled into politics and ended up working on a number of different campaigns over the next 4 years, and primarily in communications and digital on those campaigns, but kind of filled a lot of different roles, whether it was in the field or organizing. And most recently, I have been a campaign strategist at GQR, which is a polling firm, but this was a bit of a unique project within that firm, run in their kind of digital program, where we were helping Democratic campaigns deal with and handle disinformation, which has been an interesting ride in 2020. So that has kind of been my path.
Great. Well, thank you for being so concise there. There's a lot that I want to unpack in that. So let's just start right off the bat with 2020 and this election year. What has your day-to-day really looked like? And I'm assuming it's probably a little bit of everything, because it sounds like you've worn many hats. But what does your day-to-day look like, and what has been your biggest challenge?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start with the biggest challenge. I mean, working from home, I think a lot of people have found to be more difficult than maybe they anticipated. Just kind of those daily interactions, the interpersonal, relationships and interactions you have every day that kind of, make work run smoothly. And so that's been challenging. Just the working from home aspect, I would say, has been the biggest challenge this year, maybe unsurprisingly. But to kind of break up what my day to day looks like, it varied obviously from job to job. When I was on campaigns, I was mostly doing communications and digital work, as I mentioned. So I worked at the Maine Democratic Party for the 2018 cycle, part of the 2018 cycle, and was managing their social media accounts, writing copy for those social media accounts, and doing press releases and that sort of thing. And then for past campaigns, for the Return Baker campaign in Maryland, I was doing not only that sort of work on the communications and digital front, but also doing a lot of field organizing and kind of wearing a lot of different hats. Campaigns are sometimes they have a lot of staff, depending on where the race is, if it's a battleground state, if it's a high level race. But a lot of times they're kind of perpetually understaffed, and so you end up doing a lot of different things. And so it's a really cool learning experience, and it kind of broadens the experience that you have. But it's also it makes it a little difficult to say what a day-to-day
right. I knew that was a trick question, really. But I can imagine that people who are listening or watching this, who are interested in getting into this field, especially if they feel moved after this political election cycle, I think that's great advice and, a great insight. So going back to what you said about, your current role and how you were really looking at this disinformation, can you explain that in really broad terms to people who are listening or watching that might not know exactly what that means? Because you see it in the news all the time, but what exactly does that mean, and how did you specifically play a part in I guess acknowledging that or highlighting that?
For sure. So after 2016, there was a lot of talk about Russia and kind of disinformation broadly and how it impacted the election. And people felt like they'd kind of been caught flat-footed. And Democratic campaigns in particular were looking for ways to, be out ahead of the issue and prepare for it in some way. And so my firm, before I got involved, was working with the committees, so the DNC, the DCCC, and the DSCC, which are basically the campaign arms of the party. And so they work to elect Democrats in the Senate and the House, and then on a national level for president. And so this project was, the kind of idea for it was we would help landscape out a number of different states and elections and issues where a bunch of bad actors were involved and had been involved historically, and kind of look for ways that they might pop up in 2020 and kind of be prepared for those threats, and then help campaigns deal with them as they arose. And it had been kind of never done before, and so it was a little nebulous at the beginning, and that evolved as the cycle went on. But basically what I was doing day to day was working with primarily Senate campaigns and helping them as disinformation arose, as false attacks against them popped up in the right-wing media. And we realized that it was not so much Russia that was as much of a problem as it was a lot of the domestic actors that we kind of maybe took lightly in 2016 and didn't realize their reach and their impact as much. And so that was kind of an insight we had this cycle.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. Again, you see it in the news all the time, but you're directly in the weeds. And so would you say that, was like the first kind of, or I guess, let me rephrase that. You get these threats, or, you get this, this prompt in the news, where you get the disinformation. What is your first step to combat that? You said that you've been working mostly with Senate campaigns, but what is the first step in battling that?
Yeah, so there's a lot that we kind of do to lay the groundwork so that campaigns feel prepared. So initially we were doing a lot of different trainings for not only campaigns, but there was also a different side of the project that was doing trainings with groups and organizations as well. But we were primarily involved with training campaigns. So basically what we would do is get everyone on a Zoom call. We were supposed to do them in person when this project started, but obviously had to adapt. But we would take them through kind of different scenarios, give them a sort of feel for the landscape of bad actors in their race, and then give them some advice about how to deal with these situations and kind of steps to take should things come up. And so that just gave people and folks sort of a baseline of, what to expect and what to kind of do in a situation where a disinformation or influence campaign popped up. And I don't know how much in the weeds we want to go in here, but essentially what we most times our message was we want to stay on offense. And so a lot of these disinformation attacks change the conversation and have people on campaigns sometimes making decisions rashly and too quickly. And so our message and the kind of the thrust of the project was getting campaigns to stay on offense and not spend as much time looking into these attacks, and having us kind of take on that role and look into if there was a bunch of bots on Twitter or suspicious accounts that are coming up, that campaigns don't necessarily have time to look into. We can do a little bit of that and get back to them and kind of measure how far those attacks are going on social media, where they're reaching into, the communities they're reaching into, seeing if those communities are voters that the campaign cares about based on the polling. We're a polling firm, so we were doing a lot of the polling for these races. So looking at some of these attacks that came up through the lens of how is this going to affect voters? Is this something that's worth responding to, or is it just something that you can kind of ignore and try to change the subject and move on to something else? And so that was kind of the gist.
Yeah, thank you for going into detail about that, because this is something that I don't know anything about. I think there are a lot of people who are, looking at this today and they'll probably be very curious after hearing that. So thank you for giving that in layman's terms, because some people who are not in the political scene may not, pick up on that. So thank you. You mentioned before the interview started that now that the election is over, although, there's a lot still going on, the election is over. Some would say, what is next for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. One I'm trying to figure out now myself. But right now I'm looking at some opportunities in Georgia, seeing if I can maybe move down there. I have a roommate from college who is from there. And so I've been texting him about maybe moving down there and staying with his parents. COVID is not making that super easy, but I am looking to maybe get involved with one of Stacey Abrams' organizations or one of the campaigns themselves down there. There's two very important Senate races for those that are following. So basically we'll decide control of the Senate and effectively whether, any legislation is passed, any meaningful legislation is passed over the next 2 to 4 years. So that's where my head has been the last couple of days, and thinking about next steps.
Yeah, that's great. So are you trying to get there before the runoffs in January, or so this is like
so it's a bit of a tight window here. Had about a weekend to relax, and then
and then you're like thinking of the next
already
thing.
felt behind.
That was one of my questions I was going to ask next, was just given the state of our country right now, does this make you even more motivated to stay in politics, which it sounds like it absolutely does?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the day you ask. I think some days it feels like, I want to do this type of work forever, and this is, these are issues and things that I care a lot about. But other days, I definitely feel like, what if I could go and teach in Spain for a little while and do something else? But yes, no, I think right now I can't really see doing anything else. I think that the stakes are really high, and there's some pressing and, in my view, existential issues that we're facing. And so I definitely feel kind of resolved to keep at it after this election.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we need people like you, especially as young professionals, I think. So moving away from the workplace itself, what are some things about being a young professional that you like? So again, outside of the workplace, take your career out of it.
Yeah, I think for me, it has been really special to find a lot of meaningful relationships on a lot of these campaigns and jobs that I've worked in. I think a lot of times politics and campaigns are, they're pretty hard work, and the bonds and relationships that form in those conditions, working, late nights and weekends, and for a cause that you're kind of united in, is really, it's a great bonding experience and forms a lot of good friendships and hopefully, lasting friendships. And so I think, to me, being able to make some connections in this field with folks my age, because it is a very young field. I think campaigns are, traditionally staffed with younger folks. Just it's not something that you see a lot of 50-year-olds on campaigns. It's
Right.
definitely something that I think is suited for younger folks, and also the burnout rate is pretty high. So once you once you do a few cycles, people traditionally settle into more I guess stable jobs. So I think just making those connections and being young enough and not having like your roots planted, I think is an opportunity to just form a lot of meaningful, great friendships, and all the fun stuff that goes along with that, happy hours and all the rest.
Yeah. That's one thing. So one of my very first interviews, probably about 2 years ago now, with somebody, a young professional, her first job was on, she was a press wrangler for Obama. So she was an intern, and then right before he got elected, and then she was with him for 4 years. And on that 5th year, she was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it was definitely a burnout situation. And I think that's very easy, like you said, to happen in this field. So what do you personally do to avoid that work stress just weighing on you and that burnout?
Good question.
Like,
I wish I had a more ready answer. I think obviously there's a lot that on campaigns that I find really gratifying. And so that definitely keeps me involved and keeps me engaged. And a lot of times it doesn't really even feel like work on some of these campaigns. It's very energizing, and I think it attracts a lot of adrenaline junkies and people that are more are drawn to that sort of thing. I think it's also very important, though, to take some time after each cycle and kind of decompress. And so that is after the 2018 cycle, I took a big trip, went to go visit that friend I mentioned earlier, who's from Atlanta, who is now living in New Zealand. So went for a month and a half and just kind of unplugged from politics and those sorts of things. After this election, I was planning on traveling to South America. Those plans have been definitely a wrench has been thrown in those, but I think taking time to decompress and kind of reflect on these campaigns afterwards has been pretty important. And also just maintaining some like habits and activities outside of the campaign, whether that's going out for a bike ride or doing some sort of playing tennis with a friend, that sort of thing, has been very, very important.
Yeah, having those consistent habits are very, very crucial for everyone. It's not just applicable to politics. I think everyone needs to adapt healthy habits, if you will. I know that it took me a while to figure that out, but I want to I'm mindful of our time, so I want to end on a more positive note. So not asking about burnout and stress. What is something that drives you in your professional and your personal life?
Yeah, good question. So I think for me, there's a lot of reasons I was interested in politics originally. I think to me, it seems like a really unique opportunity in kind of studying politics and government. Government just seemed always to me to be this field of really immense potential and possibility, and to improve people's lives. And so that has been kind of a driving force for what I believe government can do on a number of issues that I care pretty deeply about. One of which is climate change, that I think kind of sparked my interest maybe in politics a little bit. And then, as I grew more engaged in the field and the issues, inequality has become another sort of driving force and motivator. Both of those things I think are kind of deep problems that have a bit of a timeline, if that makes sense. I think there's kind of a window with which we can in which we can deal with those issues before things kind of get beyond repair, particularly on climate change, but I think also holds on inequality. And so those two things are primarily what drive me in this field. I think there's a lot of other issues that I care really deeply about, social justice issues and racial justice issues, to name a couple. Healthcare, all the rest are once you realize the stakes for people and the impact that these things have on people's lives and the difference you can make, it is incredibly motivating. After our Virginia, I worked on the Virginia gubernatorial race, and the governor that we helped elect expanded healthcare to several thousands of people, expanded Medicaid, and so there was some direct, tangible result. It felt like having elected someone who immediately upon being sworn into office expanded healthcare to so many people just felt very very real and very impactful. And so those are the sort of things that keep you motivated and keep you engaged and remind you what the stakes are and kind of what you're working for. And so those are. But to answer your question, I think really it's been climate change and inequality recently that have over the past several years that have really driven me and motivated me in this field.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ben. I think that's a great way to end the interview. Like I said earlier in our time together, we need people like you in this space. And so I'm really happy that you feel that you are making a difference, because you really are. And it's really admirable. So thank you for your time today. I want to just touch on a few of your key takeaways for people. Obviously, building meaningful relationships in your field applies to all industries and all spaces. So if you can really build those meaningful relationships, you're going to get more bang for your buck, so to speak. Obviously you're the one getting paid, but you will get a better experience. And I think just like, again, talking about mental health, that is really very helpful to have those strong relationships. Capitalizing on opportunities now in the field while you're young. If you are not tied down to a place, person, you name it. I think the person I interviewed a while back mentioned the 3 Ps, like plants, pets, and produce or something. Like she just didn't have any of it in her apartment because she was, gone at, days at a time. But capitalizing on this opportunity now while you're young, because you can grow in that space. And again, just tied to this industry in particular, stakes are high right now. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out. So if you are somebody listening or watching this interview and you're interested in really trying to make a difference, this could be the space for you, especially as we get into 2021. So any last words, Ben, before we wrap up?
I think just to echo a little bit of what you said, I always encourage folks that I talk to who are looking to get into politics to try a campaign, because I think it's a really great way to get immersed in this field really quickly and in a way that's really meaningful, and you can take on a lot of responsibility at a young age. For folks that are just graduating college or wherever they might be, it's really I think a unique platform for people to see politics through a campaign lens and take on a lot more responsibility than they may have otherwise had in other fields or elsewhere. Kind of jump in feet first and get a really cool, unique experience.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Ben, for your time today.
Thank you.